I'm Michael Specter. I'm a staff writer at The New Yorker. And we're obviously very excited that you're all here today. And I'm particularly excited because the two women I'm talking to are really at the forefront of one of the most exciting advances that there has ever been in human information or medicine. About 55 years ago, Watson and Crick figured out the structure of DNA. And ever since then, there has been an endless feeling that the genomic revolution is upon us, that all the diseases will be cured. And it hasn't really happened until now. It's starting. The rapidity of change in this field is much faster than in Moore's law and in semiconductors. And Linda Avey and Anne Wojcicki had this ridiculously simple idea, like all brilliant ideas, which is people should have all the genetic information that they possess available to them. They should be able to use it to understand not just diseases, but how they relate to other people in the world. And they've done this with this company called 23andMe. It's a really exciting thing to watch. I've sort of watched it from the beginning, and I'm really glad to have them both here today. I want to start off by oddly reading something that was, in the 19th century, posted on a British men's club wall, because it's very relevant to genetics. During the asparagus season, members are requested not to relieve themselves in the hat stand. Now, I don't know what was going on at that club when it wasn't the asparagus season, but why do I even mention that? Because I happen to be able to smell asparagus when I pee. And I feel I know you all well enough to say that. And the reason that I can say that is because they tested me for that. It's not just about diseases. It's about finding out all sorts of interesting things about yourself. And the first thing you should do is go to their website. But I wanted to ask you guys, how did you put the particular mix of traits together? What was your sort of founding vision?
Mm-hmm. So Linda and I, when we started the company, we really saw genetics very holistically. And we said we specifically did not want to be an ancestry company, and we did not want to be a healthcare company. And that there's lots of people that we were meeting who said, you know, I actually want to make music from my genome, or I want to make art from my genome. So we decided to really create a platform where people could explore their genetic information. Specifically to your question on the research on the health side, things that, you know, information that we serve up, we really just mirror the research world. So if the research world does a fascinating study on asparagus, we're going to serve up that study about asparagus, and we're going to link it to your data. So right now we have about 60 what we call gene journal articles where we really link your data to the research world, and then it becomes really fun. So when you cover a story about some kind of genetic finding, you're able to actually see what does that actually mean for you.
But even more than what it means for you, aren't you now undertaking something that's even sort of more breathtakingly ambitious and exciting, which is to use our personal genetics as a research tool throughout the world? How do you do that?
So we're going to be pursuing studies directly, because we do think having a big platform like this could be very effective for doing broad-scale research. So in fact, we're working with the Michael J. Fox Foundation and the Parkinson's Institute in Sunnyvale, California, to bring people into our service who have Parkinson's. And it's a very complex disease. There are a lot of genes involved. We don't know the genetics of it completely. And there's also a gene-environment interaction that goes on. So what we want to do is build a platform that could really spread across the world, that once we have all of the instruments on the web, and instruments by that I mean the diagnostic tools that the doctors use to determine do you or do you not have Parkinson's, once we have those on the web, then we can do really broad-scale research with everyone who has Parkinson's really across the globe.
So would this be kind of like the peer-to-peer model in computing, where someone could be in Israel or Montana or China, and they'd be working and everyone would have access to all the information?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not so much access to all of the information, but it really provides a network for people with Parkinson's to come together and start comparing notes about their disease. You know, were they exposed to chemicals as children? Did some people in the family get it and others didn't? And then when you correlate that information to their genetics, we could really start teasing out what are these genetic underpinnings that give people this disease.
You know, maybe we should take a quick detour for those people who are not geneticists and just for a minute explain how you figure out traits and diseases. And, we all have about 6 billion base pairs, just teeny little bits of DNA, and it's mostly all the same. But sometimes there are mistakes made, and those are called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. But why do they matter?
Well, those are the markers that make us all unique, and at least it's part of what contributes to human beings being unique. But you're right, 99.5% of our DNA is all the same. That's why we all look very similar. We have one head instead of two. We have 2 legs, usually 2 arms.
Not everyone, but...
There are variations, and if people have mistakes in their DNA that is too dramatic, they don't survive. So this is why we have babies that don't survive and even fetuses that don't make it. But we do have these fine alterations that start happening, and then as populations moved out of Africa, they kind of left and created their own SNPs within their genomes that sort of propagated within their populations. So what's nice is we can actually study these mutations, as we call them, through populations and really tell you a lot about your ancestry just based on that information.
So basically you go along this long line of DNA, ATCG, and everything's the same, and then something's different. And what you're looking for, because we are so remarkably similar, are the differences, and those should correlate with diseases or traits like being, I, for instance, am very sorry to tell you all, it's not about me, I know, but I'm a bad caffeine metabolizer.
Right. So that's exactly what, we recognize that the genetic information is part of the story, and we are looking at SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphism. So one of the interesting findings that we do talk about is earwax, which is, again, breathtaking. But it turns out that there is actually one SNP that is responsible for a different type of earwax that is predominantly found in Asian populations. And it's just this one difference of all your 6 billion nucleotides that is primarily thought to be associated with this difference in earwax type. So what we are looking for, and part of what you're talking about before, is we're really looking to try to understand what part of human variation can we understand with these SNPs. And it's not going to be everything. There's things like copy number variation. You're going to find other kind of mutations. We can't test for everything, but we think that there's a good percentage of human variation that we can start to find.
And obviously, we used to think, gee, we'll figure out the gene for breast cancer, and we'll figure out the gene for Alzheimer's, and we'll figure out the gene for why I talk too much, things like that. But it's a little complicated. Like, there's many, many genes for everything.
Well,
right.
Multigenic diseases are the ones that we're focusing on now, because most of what they call the Mendelian disorders, where it's one genetic mutation that happens and it causes a disease, those are much easier to figure out. The ones that are really complex are things like cancer and Parkinson's disease and autism especially. We think autism is just going to be a disease that turns into maybe 20 different diseases. It's what they call a spectrum disorder. I just take that to mean that we don't really know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that true with lots of things? Like, aren't they thinking that way about even diabetes and Alzheimer's? That when you really look, there are many different ways that those diseases express themselves?
And that's why probably treatments don't work in a lot of people, because even though we call a disease something, it's actually something else going on at the molecular level, but we just haven't figured that out yet, and that's why a treatment just doesn't work. And drugs, on average, only work in about 40% of the people that take them, and that's one of the main reasons Anne and I really wanted to start this company, is we need to push this field forward much more quickly for this notion of personalized medicine to become a reality.
Yeah.
So when is it going to be the case that if I have a particular disease and Anne has the same disease, we'll each know that we need rather significantly different drugs and take them? Is that 10 years, 30 years?
That's exactly why we started the company, is because I think Linda and I felt a really strong passion that this was not going to happen under the current system in our lifetime. And our goal, in my personal goal, I want to see this in 5 years. I want to see that if I have children and they have to take an antibiotic, I don't want to randomly give them penicillin to see if they are going to have an allergic reaction to penicillin. I want to know ahead of time. And I think that part of our goal is really what we call the Research 2.0 concept. How can 23andMe, how can we all come together? Let's get all those individuals who've had some kind of antibiotic severe adverse event, and let's genotype them. Let's actually bring them together. Because right now, there's a huge disconnect between what the academic world and the pharmaceutical world are doing and what we as consumers actually want. So adverse events is something that we feel really strongly is significantly underfunded and understudied right now. And we feel like, again, everyone in this room, no one here wants to take a drug and have it not work.
Even simple things like Advil. Some people can take, I mean, ask the room, who gets a stomachache when you take Advil? And does your doctor know that? You know, does your doctor even have a clue how you respond to a drug? And oftentimes they don't really keep track of that information.
Yeah.
So you need a centralized repository for all of this, because a lot of times it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. There are even the problem with Vioxx that really didn't appear until hundreds of thousands of people were on the drug. So if we have one place where all people are sharing this information, these things will emerge much more quickly.
Yeah.
Now, for geeks like me, central database repositories are heaven, and I'm really into them. But apparently some people get anxious about having lots of personal information stored anywhere. Is this I mean, it's not so much how secure is your database, but how comfortable, like I've now admitted that I've been genetically tested. What if my boss over there comes up to me and demands to know, you know, like what my alcohol level is or things like that? How can is that something we should worry about or not?
So one of the great things that just happened is a bill is about to be signed in by Bush called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And that actually is something that will prevent your employer or health insurance companies from discriminating against you based on your health care, based on your genetic information. So we recognize this is a service that's not for everybody, and for individuals who are really concerned about that. But at the end of the day, we feel that there is, for individuals who are motivated, there's such an overwhelmingly positive outcome that could come from this, as you know, that outweighs some of these potential risks.
And when you talk to people who've survived cancer, there's 10 million cancer survivors in the U.S. alone, and when you talk to them, they just want to get the information out there. I have a friend who walks around with a PowerPoint presentation with his gene expression profile of his tumor in it. I mean, he's just like, take this information and do something with it. So when you talk to the right people, and there's a website called Patients Like Me where people are putting information on the web, personal information about their disease, that you get to a point in your life that you don't worry so much about that. You want to help your family. You want to help other people who have these diseases. So that's really why we're going directly to research groups and disease communities to say, we're here, we're a platform, and we're ready.
You know, it's interesting because when the genome was decoded, the operative sense was, we're all one person, nobody's different, it's so beautiful. The truth is, those teeny-weeny little differences is what we're talking about, and that's why some people get sick and others don't when exposed to the same environment. You have a project, or are thinking of a project, where you're going to do this with a number of diseases. I believe the number might be 23 diseases?
To start, yeah. We just, we seem to like the number 23. It has nothing to do with Michael Jordan. We get that question a lot. But yeah.
Does anyone know what it has to, I don't even want to ask this question, but good. I assume that,
Sure.
Chromosomes. Okay.
Yes, exactly. But it is nice that it's David Beckham's number and LeBron James and Michael Jordan. So if anybody knows them out there, we'd love them as spokespeople for the company.
Good blatant plug. When I talk to Bex tonight, I'll bring it up.
Okay, good. Posh.
So how are you going to do the 23 disease project? I mean, how do you start? Do you do, I mean, lung cancer is a terrible one, but do you do that, or do you do something that maybe is more amenable to early knowledge? And do you work with partners? I mean, there's a lot of hospitals out there with tons of people in databases. Are you trying to do that?
So we really see ourselves as the liaison between the consumers and the entire research world. So if there is, if we're doing a study like what we're doing with Parkinson's, we've gone out and we've actually partnered with Michael J. Fox Foundation and the Parkinson's Institute. And the great thing about both those organizations is they have international collaborators. So how can we actually really make this an international study where we actually are working with groups from all over the world? So we do not want, 23andMe will take on projects, but the great thing, we also recognize that we're kind of a neutral body between the consumer and the research world. We're not experts in everything. So as needed, we'll bring on the experts like Michael J. Fox and Parkinson's Institute to be the partner to really help us understand, okay, what are the important questions to be asking Parkinson's patients? What is the right way to collect this information? And then also when we start doing the data analysis. So we're not starting with the 23 diseases just yet, but we'll start with a smaller number that we can more readily digest, and some of those will definitely be the adverse events, some things that, I'll probably a good percentage of people in this room have taken a statin, and there is a very rare side effect that's understudied that causes muscle wasting and can be very severe and could actually lead to death. It would be actually great to understand, are you potentially at risk for this? So we'll definitely do something probably in the adverse event area. Cancers are definitely big. And what we really wanted to do is also we want to hear from our customers, what is it that's most important to them? And we get a number of rare groups rare disease groups who come and say, we have 700 people, we're ready to go. We're motivated. This is underfunded. We can't get the government to pay attention. Academia, can't get grants for this. We're ready to go. We're all willing to put in $1,000 into this.
Let me ask you, say you take this test and you get the results and you look at one of the things that you predict for is heart attack, and say someone looks at the website and you have a sort of 6.4 times greater chance of having a heart attack than that normal type of person who has your background. That would be probably distressing to most people. Is there any help to be offered? I mean, how do you make sense of those things?
Well, we are looking to work with the genetic counseling community as well. In fact, we had a webcast last week to get them familiar with the type of information we're giving back to our customers. But I have to say, so far, we launched in November, and I think it's more the fear people have before they look at their data. I was on with Martin Bashir on Nightline, and he was very nervous before, and then he looked at his data and he was like, when you take it in the context of, first of all, it's not a diagnostic. This is just information that's being pulled out of the research community. We still have to validate it in the clinic, and it's pretty subtle. A lot of it is just sometimes minor increases in things. There are some times where you do see that you have a more dramatic increase for a disease. But overall, we're finding that people are able to take in this information pretty much on their own.
Some states are, Anne said the words Bush, good law, and signing in one sentence, which is a historic first for a New Yorker event. But, and also for her, I think. But there are people in government entities, including, I think, even the state of New York, who are anxious about this stuff and basically say, this is a medical diagnostic test, and we need doctors, and we need to regulate it, and we need to oversee it. And I think your view is, this is something you can do or not do. But where are you with that? How's that working?
Well, we're obviously talking to different states that have regulations and trying to see how this new field of personal genetics fits in with existing regulations. And sometimes it's an okay fit, and sometimes things need to be tweaked a bit. But we're very much in line with public health systems that really want to protect people of their states and make sure that they're not getting really bad information, and there are things that will protect them. There are laws already in place about fraudulent claims, and so we're definitely in discussions, and we do think this field needs to be regulated, because we've already seen personally some companies that are putting the information way ahead of the science, and we're very conservative. Our science team, we have, I think, 15 plus PhDs, and they come with this concern that we need to make sure that this information is delivered in a very responsible way.
Mm-hmm. On your website, when you take this test, there's tons of conditions, and they're rated in different ways. Mm-hmm. So some are rated, there's a lot of information about heart attack and heart disease and diabetes, and that's given your highest rating, which I believe means the largest number of studies in the best possible way. There are other things, and I'm glad, like some of my bad habits, that are kind of not so clear, but you put them up there, and you let people know that it's early days. Mm-hmm. But how do you make those decisions? Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you decide what people should be confident in and what they shouldn't? Because this is really sort of big-ticket emotional stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not. It's something. One of the reasons why we have such a big science team is that it does actually require a fair amount of discussion. Each week new studies are coming out. Significant, what we call the genome-wide association studies, when they come out, they do actually receive a fair amount of attention. So if it's a really large study that has been replicated, we feel comfortable with it. We put it as what we call established research. So it means that the scientific community overall feels comfortable with this association that has been found. we feel comfortable reporting to, this is likely to be very real. There's other studies that come out that are reported in the popular press, like the caffeine metabolism one, which it's a very interesting study, but it hasn't been replicated. It was done in under 1,000 people, but because it's in the popular press, we actually want to educate people about it. We feel it's really important for people to read and understand and say, just because something came out in the journal, in New England Journal of Medicine or in Science Magazine, doesn't mean it's real. A good percentage of those studies are going to be retracted. So we feel it's important to actually educate people about that. It came out in a major magazine, but it was a small study.
These are the caveats, exactly.
But what's interesting about it, let's just take the caffeine metabolism. There have been, every time you pick up a newspaper, caffeine causes heart attacks. Caffeine's good for you. Red wine causes heart attacks. Red wine cures cancer. It's very difficult to figure out what the hell to do.
Right.
And one of the possible reasons for that, I think, with caffeine, for instance, is if you metabolize caffeine rapidly, as I do not, then perhaps you would have less of a risk of having some of these problems. Isn't that the thinking? I mean, again, it's a very personalized approach to an unbelievably common thing.
Well, and that's part of the problem is that these studies are done in small cohorts, and they think they find something and they want to get it published because that's how career science works. You publish and then you get another grant and you keep going through your career. And we want to kind of change that because we want to cure diseases. We want to find out these things so that we can affect healthcare. And not that researchers don't have that ambition, but we just feel like this is a new style of doing this research, and we think it's going to be very, very effective.
So there's been this discussion in the medical geek community for a long time about the $1,000 genome, which is to say your entire genome would be sequenced and characterized for $1,000. That's a ways off. Your test costs $1,000 for quite a few pieces of information, but it isn't 6 billion. Are we going to get to the $1,000 genome anytime in our lifetime?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've been really surprised about in the last couple of years is just how fast the technology has been evolving. And we've been amazed. The number of next generation sequencing technologies that have come through the door that have technology that looks promising, ranging anywhere from $35,000 to $300,000 for a full sequence, is phenomenal. So we think it's actually going to be probably sooner, I would say in the next 5 years, you should start to see affordable sequencing. And I think then we really, SNPs are part of the story, but then we really will get into copy number variation, some of these rare mutations. We'll have a really comprehensive view, and we'll have a much better understanding.
So people who are young today, they're going to go to their physician in 30 years, and they're going to take their genome, and they're going to sit down, and they're going to analyze the sequence, and the guy's going to say, well, you can't take this drug, but you can't take that drug, and you really ought to watch about this, and maybe you should think about having a mastectomy because you have such high risk for a certain type of breast cancer. Is that where we're headed?
Yeah, we don't really know what the time frame will be for that. And again, that's really why we felt like we need way more. We just need a lot more genome profiles in a database to study to connect to these endpoints. Like prostate cancer is one of the most difficult cancers to treat because most men are going to get it at some point in their life. But when do you do treatment? Because the treatment itself has a lot of bad side effects. So a lot of prostate cancer doctors want to study the endpoints and connect that to the genetics to see, can we let this go or should we treat it?
There's a lot of examples. I do think that in the future, for things like depression or women taking birth control pills, these are unfortunate treatments where they usually ask someone to try a therapy for a period of time. It doesn't work. You go on a washout period, then you try a different therapy. It's just going to be antiquated. You should go in. You should actually see which drug is going to actually work with you, and then that should be it.
We're running out of time, so I want to kind of move back to what's really important, earwax. Why did you decide to do things like asparagus, earwax, that kind of silly?
Yeah.
We don't really find it silly, and the point is that these are the few things that we do know about the human genome. We actually don't know. We don't have the answer on the asparagus stuff. So we're doing a study on that. We know that people can smell it and some people can't, but is it because they don't produce the chemical in their urine or because their nose can't pick it up? We don't know.
And I just assumed it because some people produce and some people don't.
We don't know the full answer.
But it's what we report back to our customers is what little we know, and as we learn more, if it can be about earwax, it can be about curly hair. It can be about prostate cancer. We're, as Anne was saying earlier, we're very holistic about genetics, and as we learn more things, we're going to serve that up to our customers.
And also one thing that we found is not everybody's interested in health. Not everyone's interested in some kind of illness.
Especially younger people.
Yeah, and one thing that we do is almost everyone who comes in the office, we ask them, well, what's something that's unusual about you?
Yeah.
So we know that there's something unusual about you,
One thing at the most.
But people come in and they have all kinds of interesting things, and it could be the unusual kind of tongue curling, or unusual eyebrow, or everybody has some kind of odd trick that they can do, and it's the long tail of human diversity, and that's exactly what we celebrate. You're never going to get an NIH grant to study asparagus or tongue curling, but it's fun for people. It's really fun.
And thank God we have you to do it for us.